Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. 2023 is going to be a very exciting year for partnerships in climate tech. Why exactly? You'll hear that from our panelists. So we have over 200 people signed up for this webinar, so we've clearly hit the trend here with that topic. Before we really get kicked off with the dialogue, just a bit of a Zoom etiquette. Please mute yourself. Feel free to have your video on or off. Please use the chat freely, introduce yourself, let us know where you're dialing in from. We really want to make this an interactive webinar and build a community. We will share the slides with everyone who registered, so don't worry, you'll get those. And there'll be a Q&A session after the initial introductory chat. So pop your questions into the chat, we'll be monitoring them and we'll make sure we'll get them asked at the end. I'm Bettina. I'm your host for today. I'm a partner at Alder and I'm joining from the Bay Area. My pronouns are she, her. And my co-host and today's moderator is Melanie Adamson. She's the founder and chief strategist at Alder Co. Mel is joining us from Portland, Oregon, and Mel's pronouns are she, her. For those of you who don't know Alder, we're a women and minority-owned marketing agency focused on scaling climate tech. A lot of what we do, like today's webinar, is about building community. So we also run Tofu, which is a bi-weekly newsletter and Slack community for climate tech marketers or marketing hat-wearing founders and salespeople, where you can join and get advice on various marketing topics. So if you aren't already a member, I encourage you to join, and I will pop the link into the Slack, into the chat momentarily. We're super excited to have assembled a team of climate tech partnership marketing experts today, starting with Elaine Hsieh, co-founder and CMO principal at Third Derivative, a program of the Rocky Mountain Institute. Elaine has 25 years of industry leadership experience in sustainability, green building, clean energy, and technology. She's currently focused on scaling up Third Derivative, which is a vertically integrated global climate tech accelerator founded by Rocky Mountain Institute and UNICEF. Elaine graduated from Duke University with a master's degree in engineering management and a bachelor's in biomedical engineering. Elaine's pronouns are she, her, and she's dialing in from Oakland. Gilbert Campbell is the founder and CEO of Volt Utility Energy, a national renewable energy firm that finances and develops utility-scale solar and energy storage projects. Gilbert is an advocate and spokesperson for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and he regularly advises federal and local officials, corporations, and other key stakeholders on policies and best practices. He graduated with a BBA in finance from Howard University and has done postgraduate leadership training at Harvard. Gilbert's pronouns are he, him, and he's joining us from Arlington, Virginia. And last but not least, Keally DeWitt. She is Vice President, Marketing and Public Policy at GAF Energy. Keally started in renewables as the head of marketing for the largest solar company in the Northeast before moving into marketing and public policy leadership roles at Sunrun and SunPower. Prior to joining GAF Energy, she served as head of marketing at Mosaic. Keally has a BA from Brown University, and Keally's pronouns are she, they, and she's also based in Portland, California. So we have so many of you joining us today from all over the world, and as I mentioned earlier, this is all about building a climate tech marketing community. So please let us know in the chat where you're dialing in from, share your LinkedIn, feel free to comment on what's being said on the screen, and we're really happy to have you. For those who just joined, please mute yourself, feel free to have video on or off. You will be getting the slides at the end, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions at the end too. And now I'll hand over to Mel, who will lead through the presentation and the Q&A.
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here today to share this great information with you. It was interesting because when Bettina and I were envisioning what would be the best topic for climate tech marketers this year, partner marketing was on the forefront of our minds. Just in the last 2 years, we've seen companies moving from R&D to pilots and into commercialization, where multi-stakeholder collaboration is key to driving climate technologies until they become universal. So we're going to start off with Elaine, and she is going to show you about what it's like to be in the middle of an ecosystem.
Thanks so much. First of all, thanks so much to Bettina and Mel for inviting us at Third Derivative, and also me. This is such a great topic. Just for reference, at Third Derivative, also known as D3, our mission is to build an inclusive global ecosystem that rapidly finds, funds, and scales climate tech innovation and transforms markets. So our name, mathy, wonky, we're accelerating the rate of climate innovation through an integrative model that specifically addresses barriers that typically a lot of promising climate tech solutions have trouble with. There's a lot of barriers that impede their progress in order to be able to help them scale at the rate that we need them. So basically, we were founded in early 2020, and RMI, formerly known as Rocky Mountain Institute, felt that there weren't a lot of good technical solutions for most of the critical emissions that were needed to abate to need to be abated to fight climate change. And so while there were solutions that currently worked, they weren't very economical compared to other alternatives. And we needed to really address the critical technical solutions for especially the harder to abate sectors like cement, steel, chemicals, shipping, aviation. A lot of these things make up the majority, 2/3 actually, of our emissions. And not only that, we needed solutions to be able to draw down carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions, because even by IPCC estimates, we need all of those things, gigatons worth of carbon removal afterward, right? So the reason why these solutions and technologies are hard to commercialize is because typically climate tech startups, especially hard tech and hard science solutions, have more significant capital needs and longer paths to market than software startups favored by investors. And they also rely on large, slow-moving, risk-averse corporations as critical customers and deployment partners and acquirers. And you got to navigate complex market, regulatory, and policy landscapes that generally favor incumbents and challenge disruptors. So as a startup entrepreneur, you're facing a lot of barriers. So we created this network with committed investors, global corporates, just working together from the start, infused with RMI's market, regulatory, and policy insights. And basically what we did was unite and align all these stakeholders in order to bridge the startup gaps faster. They're supported by financing and insights to allow innovations to progress more quickly. And so we have this integrative approach to solving these really tough climate and energy challenges. And we're seeking to overcome the multiple valleys of death, as you can see here, that a lot of promising startups fail to cross. And we get them this help early on, all together in a very collaborative approach to become market ready to scale up faster. So instead of the VC and the energy startup and the corporate innovation team struggling to work in isolation, we're bringing them all together with market experts to speed the deployment of their solutions. And then that ecosystem can thrive. It's kind of a flywheel effect here in terms of an open collaborative ecosystem approach. Next slide. So obviously startups need different types of support and resources to intervene in each stage of their growth. So we're bringing together all these different stakeholders in this open collaborative ecosystem, right, to work together from the start to help our startups develop, commercialize, and ultimately scale. And so we've got New Energy Nexus. They have an entrepreneurial community around the world. They support our organization. They are a sister organization. We were co-founded by them. They are the world's leading ecosystem of funds and accelerators supporting diverse clean energy entrepreneurs across 10 countries, including a lot of regions that are typically under-resourced, like Southeast Asia and Africa. And then we've got about 20 investor partners across 5 continents ready to help and fund. So we've got VCs with over 7 billion in total assets under management. Then we have 11 multinational corporate partners so far. They all have really ambitious climate and decarbonization targets. They're ready to mentor, provide market insights, pilot, and do deals. But they're de-risking the process for an investor because they're already showing commercial interest. And the investor is de-risking it for the corporate because they provide the capital and the corporate doesn't have to do that at such an early stage. So it's actually quite a very synergistic process in that way. In addition, obviously, they obviously are mission aligned. They're all wanting to be collaborative, even though they represent different sectors and interests. And then finally, we have this small army of market makers and techno-economic experts to provide that market regulatory and policy guidance at RMI. So far we've selected 125 startups in our portfolio, and we've had thousands of applicants over, more than 100 countries. And it's not just software, it's hard tech, hard science, business model innovations, financial innovations, and it's across every major greenhouse gas emission sector. And it really reflects global impacts based on IEA estimates. So before I stop, if you're interested in our Global Climate Tech Accelerator program, we're opening up our next call for applications on January 24th. That's it.
That's great. Thank you, Elaine. One of the questions I was wondering, because there's a lot of different stages of companies it seems like you might be working with. Is there one particular stage that's better than the other to start partnering with some of these organizations?
Well, I think partnership is always important at every stage. It's easier in certain stages, but really the needs are very bespoke. So in our kind of virtual 18-month accelerator program, our approach to different kinds of startups, whether they're just coming out of the lab or they're in Series C or later, they're all going to need different kinds of capital and different kinds of support. And they all require partnerships, right? It's easier the earlier on you engage partners, because then you can co-create or you can create more non-zero sum game kind of partnership, models. And so, I mean, generally I would err on earlier stage, right? Like if you can do it earlier, that's better. That said, if you're very clear and you formed a very clear thesis, a very clear economic approach, you understand already how the market works, because you're an insider. Partnership is also really good because getting the different perspectives across the different stakeholders that are going to affect your ability to scale up is going to inform your model and allow you to be much more efficient in the way that you're going to deploy.
That's great. Thank you so much. All right, well, we're going to move on to Keally DeWitt. All right.
Great, thank you so much. Wonderful to be here, and really excited to be discussing this topic about collaboration and how do we come together to move forward effectively. So love the D3 model. It's fascinating to me to see how we're all trying to climb this mountain together and get through those valleys of death, Elaine, and coming up with slightly different solutions that have similar flavors. So at GF Energy, to use Elaine's words, we joined the incumbent. We joined that slow-moving corporation that actually has a lot of capital to overcome hardware challenges, hardware development challenges. We are part of the largest roofing company in the world. We actually share a brand, a name, and all of those things, those intangibles that make a brand, with the largest waterproofing and roofing manufacturer in North America, GAF. And last year, we announced at GF Energy the world's first nailable solar shingle. So we've actually been able to kind of solve a bit of the innovator's dilemma in relying on the strong foundation of GAF and the hold company that we have, Standard Industries. They're the largest roofing company in the world, the conglomeration of companies that they oversee, by leaning into deep partnership with the incumbent. We actually spun out of GAF, and we work very closely with them, going to market through GAF's network of roofing partners, and being able to tap deeply into the expertise, the century plus of roofing expertise that GAF has. So that's an overview of the company and the structure. So two key components of partnership marketing and sort of this collaborative approach that I want to draw attention to. The first thing is credibility, right? We are GF Energy. We're able to launch this revolutionary product by working very closely with the incumbent, with the company that is established in the marketplace. And so when we go to roofers and when we go to reporters or consumers, we immediately have that heft of GAF behind us. I like to say is, if you're going to a cocktail party, would you rather go with somebody who knows other people there, or would you rather go by yourself? Some people like to go and just meet people individually, but having that person at your side who can make the introductions is so much more powerful and puts everybody at greater ease. So GAF is massive. 1 in 4 homes in the United States has a GAF roof. They were the first to establish a lifetime limited warranty on roofs, and they offer comprehensive roofing solutions. So we tap into what they've been able to establish over time, and that gives us this instant credibility with a technologically new product. The way we got there, though, at the core of the work that we've done to develop this product was empathy. And so using a design thinking approach and getting really curious about the unmet needs of roofers when it came to solar. So we now have this building integrated photovoltaic product that is based on how roofers install roofs since, time immemorial in this country. Hammer and a nail, or at this point in time, a pneumatic nail gun and nails. So the Timberland solar energy shingle has a nail strip just like a regular asphalt shingle, and you install it just like a regular shingle. So it installs in a comparable amount of time, and is something, it's a form factor that roofers were already familiar with. So we got really involved with our roofing partners, and we had access through the credibility and connections that we had with GAF. And we had PhD material scientists on the roof with roofers asking questions, rolling up their sleeves saying, okay, how do you do this? And letting them really be our teachers. And the response has been incredible. We are the most awarded BIPV product, the most awarded solar roofing product in the history of the category. And it's incredible to see the thing go in on the roof, and like the light bulbs that go off in roofers' brains, and the way they light up when they see this product, because it was really designed for them. And that's the deepest type of partnership that I think that you can create when you really build something together and create something new under the sun.
Keally, that's an amazing story. I'm curious because you were talking about you're able to leverage the credibility of the bigger brand, right? But when you're actually going out and partnering with other companies, how do you set a criteria for the types of partners that you like, credibility for your partners? How do you set that criteria? Or is there some sort of checklist, or what's sort of the tactical way of measuring someone else's or some partner's credibility that you want to tie your brand to?
There are a number of factors that go into that. I feel like being at GF Energy in this like deep partnership with this massive roofing company is a natural extension of programs that I ran previously at Sunrun and SunPower, where we partnered with Sierra Club, with AT&T, with Con Edison. I think there has to be some sort of through line, right? That there has to be an understanding on both sides of what the product offers, the sort of mission-driven quality of the company. And so you want there to be a bar for the way that the partners treat their customers, the way that they're showing up in the world, their sort of track record and integrity as a brand. And there also has to be a strong business case for it too. So you get kind of the more qualitative and quantitative pieces coming together to say, how can we mutually advance our cause when it comes to our bottom line, but how do we also work together in a way that makes both of us show up in a way that is more favorable to various audiences. But there has to be a baseline of the way that people treat their stakeholders, and really, approaching this term of like stakeholder capitalism, right? And so looking for people who have that broader mindset and companies that have a broader mindset.
Yeah, I totally hear you. One of the things that Alder does with partners, and coincidentally today, we just sent out a press release with one of our partners, an analyst firm called Net Zero Insights. And, they're just nice people. And yes, they're smart, they meet our values, but they're just really nice and fun. And we love working with them. And I think kind of what you were saying, that qualitative, kind of checking that box means a lot.
Huge. Yeah.
I just want to let everyone know, please put questions in the chat if you have any for our speakers, and we will convey them. I have questions, but I'm sure you guys have a ton of questions too. So we want to be able to make sure that you're getting your answers. All right. Thank you, Keally. I appreciate your slides. All right, Gilbert.
Great. Well, excuse me. Well, good afternoon to some and good morning. I'm Gilbert Campbell, as mentioned earlier, founder and CEO of a company called Volt Energy Utility. I'd like to thank Bettina and Mel for putting together this great agenda today and for the invitation to speak. So I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about some of the work that we've done in really branding an innovative new climate justice product to kind of meet the times. And I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about the origin of coming up and why, did we decide to launch a company really based off of a social justice / climate justice product, the purpose of what we're doing, and talk a little bit about the impact, and then pivot to talk a little bit about how we are able to leverage real meaningful partnerships to deliver on the concept that we came up with. So I started a company in 2009 called Volt Energy, which was focusing on developing distributed generation. So like Keally talked about at GF Energy, like rooftop solar and solar carports for large commercial companies around the country, like the Cheesecake Factory or Subaru. But one of the things when I co-founded that company that was kind of our North Star was to make sure that we were impacting communities, and particularly communities of color and underserved rural communities that had been on the front line of all of the bad aspects of environmental justice and not benefiting from the transition that we're going to as we're decarbonizing all aspects of our society. The second thing I wanted to address, being one of the few African-American founders of a clean tech company in that particular business, was making sure that the pipeline of candidates looks more like America. And so with that said, a lot of work that we did was at places where we met the community where they were at. We did the first solar project at an African-American church called Florida Avenue Baptist in Washington, D.C. I get asked all the time, like, what are some of the most meaningful projects you've done? That was the smallest project we've ever done, the lowest margin we've ever made, but had the biggest impact. And what do I mean by that? So I had an hypothesis in 2010 with the pastor of, in many communities, particularly African-American communities, the church is the center of the community. And we wanted to be able to demonstrate that, African-American churches can green the churches, and it has a bigger impact, obviously, than just helping them to save in energy bills and obviously move towards decarbonization. And what happened out of that project was, once it was done, a lot of the young people in the church really were drawn by the technology. They could come and see, touch solar for the first time. And so prior to COVID, if you were to go to that church, you'd have youth in the church walking you through and explaining how solar panels convert with inverters to DC to AC, and it ties into the building. So it just is a demonstration of showing up, people get it. And then we help the church establish a green ministry to teach people, like as an example, like how do you read things that are intentionally complicated, like a utility bill, what are kilowatt hours, and how do you reduce that, and how do you save on demand charges, et cetera, et cetera. That's one example. Also have done projects at numerous historically Black colleges, universities with intentionality to make sure that students are understanding, what is climate change, what is environmental justice, what is sustainability, but also how can they be part of the solution. So Howard University, my alma mater, is one of the many HBCUs that we've done multiple projects at. But as I continued to, just watch how things evolve, got frustrated as far as just looking at the potential to do more in underserved communities, and also with and there was progress, but not at the rate that it should have been, as far as seeing more diverse candidates coming into this space. I know many of you can maybe relate to this, but I get calls all the time from various peers, CEOs of other companies, HR directors. We're looking for diverse talent to fill the roles, and there's a genuine interest, but don't know where to go to find that talent. And so that, it's kind of mentioned, got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And then the fuel really hit the fire when around the time of the tragic killing of George Floyd. And during that period, as we all saw, responsible corporations made very public proclamations that they wanted to do several things differently. They wanted to invest in frontline communities. They wanted to diversify the supply chain that they work with. And one of the areas that really starting with a lot of the tech companies who have very aggressive decarbonization goals for their power load was we're looking for diverse developers to help them meet their decarbonization goals. So at that moment, I really spent a lot of time saying I've spent a decade developing rooftop solar, but really looking at where things are headed for a lot of big companies to meet their aggressive decarbonization goals. Distributed generation is an absolute wonderful resource and tool, but a lot of companies really were pivoting towards the virtual power purchase agreement to meet the aggressive demand. And so looking at that structure, historically projects are developed obviously in rural areas. You can't develop utility scale solar in Washington, DC, where I'm based at, Philadelphia, LA, Detroit. I can go on and on in most urban cities that are plagued with a lot of environmental injustice. So it's great for local economic development in a lot of rural areas across this country that have benefited from large utility scale solar projects being delivered. But there also had to be a way that you could incorporate the communities that I mentioned had been locked out from and face all of the other bad aspects of the environmental movement. So make a long story short, came up with this concept, called it the Environmental Justice Power Purchase Agreement, which is really to match how companies procure utility scale solar through the power purchase agreement. But the difference was the premise that we came up with, and it was just a concept, was let's create a vehicle and let's approach some of our larger corporate partners that have aggressive decarbonization goals. And is there a way where maybe it's, through them paying a slight premium, we're contributing a portion of our revenue into a fund, even though the projects aren't developed in like the DCs and Detroits and LAs and the Philadelphias, et cetera, but where can we find the closest community where the project is sited that has significant environmental justice challenges? And at the same time, the EPA has a list of communities that are plagued by environmental justice. So our environmental justice power purchase agreement concept basically is simple. Our clients pay a slight premium. The projects are built in rural areas, but that premium 100% as well as a percentage of our revenue goes into what we eventually landed on, a foundation called Sharing the Power Foundation, which is an environmental justice foundation that is making transformative investments across the country to combat environmental injustice. And part of that is there's two main focuses of those investments. And the first part is we're investing, not reinventing the wheel, in grassroots organizations, nonprofits, like as an example, Gooder, based in Atlanta, that's doing awesome work to address food insecurity. The Center for Coalfield Justice in Pennsylvania, which is training displaced coal miners to get into clean energy jobs. We felt it was imperative to provide them the means they need to further their work, but also remove some of the historic barriers in a long grant request. We work with a diverse firm called Just Fund to make it easier to have a one-page application to see the work that they're doing and be able to provide funding, and others can do the same thing. The second thing, and I mentioned in my previous comments, we wanted to address was the lack of a diverse pipeline of candidates coming into the space. So the first company that stepped up to the plate, we had very authentic conversations. And this goes back to this particular slide talking about allyship marketing, which is just a spin on partnership marketing. Quick definition of allyship, I think most of us knows, is when a group of people are operating in solidarity to advance the interest of underserved groups. And that's what we're talking about here. So Microsoft stepped up and we signed a groundbreaking 250 megawatt framework agreement to develop projects across the country, and which was going to contribute a significant amount, 8 figures, into a brand new environmental justice foundation to make investments. So what are some of the quick impacts that came out of that? In just 1 year, in 2022, when the foundation launched, we invested in 7 environmental justice organizations across the country, grants ranging from $5,000 to $50,000. And the second thing I'm really proud of is we developed this program at historically Black colleges and universities. We called it the Environmental Justice Ambassador Fellowship Program, where we took 6 students to start, paired them with environmental justice organizations that we funded, The students were paid $8,000 for an 8-week program, so the organizations did not have to pay for the students working for the summer, but the students also had to do meaningful work. It wasn't clerical work, and they had case studies that they have to do. And when they went back to college in the fall, they all received a $10,000 scholarship to be what we call ambassadors on campus. It's kind of a spinoff of what Colgate did with the backpack marketing. It was, let's take students, share what they've learned so they understand what environmental justice is, what communities are dealing with. But as they become clean energy leaders and they get into clean energy sustainability careers, they won't forget the communities that have been left behind. And that's what we're trying to build, is to address the lack of a pipeline, but putting together a thoughtful group of young leaders that are passionate to solve these issues. And so that was great. And so when we talk about allyship marketing, this became really easy. It really wasn't selling to our corporate partners. It's became, more about, let's not talk about procuring electrons. How can we procure electrons in a way that's transforming communities and talking about real people? And breaking that down and having corporate buy-in, Microsoft and our company put together a white paper in October of last year, just talking about how that was done, what are ways that other companies can do the same thing, so then that way it becomes something that's sustainable in a different way to look at procurement for whatever your product is. You can find some commonality with your customers to improve the lives of the communities that we're all very fortunate and blessed to serve in. And then just the last thing I'll say, so that's our corporate customers, but at this crux, our customer really is the community. So we spend a lot of time listening, and Keally mentioned empathy, really understanding what are the needs in communities, what are the needs for students. We've engaged students as interns. I'm far removed from being a college student, to tell us how can we best serve them in a program, and that really helped to make it successful. And then the other part I would just say in the allyship marketing or telling a story, we became one of the, might have been the first diverse signatory to the climate pledge, but have gone across the country over the last 18 months, really just talking about how do you marry a passion around the community, and tying that into a product and services that that you can offer, and really putting together a broad coalition of stakeholders that can help you achieve that goal. So thank you for the time this afternoon, and I'm happy to address any questions that anyone may have.
Wow, Gilbert, that's amazing. Just want to say thank you for doing all of that work. Working with a big brand like Microsoft is no easy feat. And you were able to connect with them and partner with them on, 2 different initiatives, it sounds like. Not only the partnership to, start, this agreement and the funds, but then also to advocate for the model and to get other people involved. And I think that's really admirable. This may sound like an easy question or, obvious to some people, but I think there are some people who just want to know, how do you approach a Microsoft? From a tactical perspective, what does it take to get through to the right people all the time? That's kind of the hardest battle sometimes, is finding that wonderful partner who can, help you leverage, your program, but then how do you get to the right person?
That's a great question. I think part of it is, I sit on several boards, and I'm a firm believer in serving and doing a good job and having a diverse group of relationships. So I was introduced to, some of the right folks. And that's 10 years, running a business to be able to also cultivate a lot of those organic relationships, but not also just being happy being in the room. When you have a seat at the table, it's telling your truth. And what I mean that is, one of the challenges, especially as a small, diverse business, looking to be a developer and then, going from DG to utility scale is a big jump. As one example, having the ear of Microsoft and saying, you know what, if we go the traditional route of an RFP, there's inherent biases that will make it very difficult for my company to bid. And what do you mean by that? And just walking through it and telling your truth. But if you're committed to a cause, you'll see that through. Not everyone may not see it, but those companies that, that are mission aligned with you we'll do things differently. And that's what we did. You know, we said, okay, let's tear up the traditional playbook and let's figure out an innovative way to impact communities and still be able to help you meet your aggressive decarbonization goals. So that's what we did. But also, I'm not going to minimize where you can just pick up the call, you know, call Microsoft and say, hey, let's have a conversation. You know, there were a lot of blood, sweat, tears, years spent to really build meaningful relationships and people that wanted to help and believed in the mission of, you know, of the company and the leadership.
That's great. That's really fantastic. All right. Do we have more questions from the audience? I'd like to open it up to Q&A. So put your questions in the chat. We have one here for Keally. Oh, good. I can see all your faces now. From Mike. And honestly, everyone on the panel, I hope that if you want to jump in and answer this question, can you talk about any government subsidies that can be applied to your product, and also how you're bridging conversations of short-term and long-term economics when homeowners and builders are making the decision to go with your product versus traditional roofing products?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So as far as subsidies or incentives go, you know, within the rooftop solar marketplace, the old standby, and the thing that we rely on primarily is the investment tax credit on a federal basis. And so with the Inflation Reduction Act, securing that for the next 10 years at 30% has been tremendously helpful. We also do manufacture our energy shingles in San Jose, California, and soon in Texas. We have a 110,000 square foot facility in San Jose, and we'll be opening a 450,000 square foot facility just north of Austin in Georgetown, Texas. So we do benefit from some of the domestic manufacturing and domestic content provisions within the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, the Treasury will be issuing guidance on that soon, and to be determined what the ultimate outcome will be there. But we very much hope that there is continued incentive for us to manufacture in the U.S. and really build that base. It's exciting to see so much solar and renewable energy manufacturing returning to the U.S. Recent announcements by Qcells and others have been really incredible. As far as short-term and long-term incentives economically for the individual homeowner, you know, our product, speaking of empathy, right, we really wanted, in our vision is energy from every roof. And so we really wanted this to be more accessible as much as possible. Now we do realize that there's additional capital investment that you have to make when you're opting for a solar roof versus a regular roof. But our landing zone with the price to the homeowner is equivalent to getting a new roof and retrofit solar. So it's the same you would pay, the equivalent you would pay to getting, you know, kind of traditional racks and large panels and a new roof. So we've been really faithful to that. Now the roofers that we go to market with ultimately set the price to the homeowner. So there's some flexibility, and we don't have the ultimate say. There's sort of a MSRP that we offer. But so what you see is really equivalent as far as the payback period and the ROI to investing in regular solar. I think there's a perception with the Tesla solar roof that it is sort of a premium product. It looks better on the roof. It protects the home more effectively because it is certified as a roof. It's going to be more expensive, but we've really worked within our process to make sure that there's an equivalence there with more traditional retrofit rack mounted solar.
Okay. All right, that was really more specific to you. So I'm going to move on to other questions. Kyla wants to know, how have folks successfully convinced engineering technical partners of the value of credibility, brand reputation, and having a comprehensive set of criteria to evaluate partnerships?
I can take that one if you want.
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Sure. So, I mean, this is a tricky one, right? Like, our portfolio has a lot of highly technical, I mean, a lot of the founders in our portfolio are probably more engineers than entrepreneurs. So there's a challenge in terms of their inherent ability to even pitch, much less talk to corporates about what their kind of underlying specs are or their criteria for evaluation. I mean, accelerators like ours are set up to sort of help facilitate a lot of these discussions and understand what the criteria is for a lot of these commercial opportunities. But I'll give you an example. So for example, one of our founding corporate partners is Berkshire Hathaway Energy. So they're part of the larger holding company, Berkshire Hathaway. They're the ones that manage a lot of utilities, and they have a very fossil-based kind of asset class. They were struggling with upgrading their transmission line infrastructure to integrate more renewable energy sources without costly upgrades. And there's a lot of technical aspects about like putting a steel core on there and then the line sag and all this other stuff. Well, we have a startup portfolio company named TS Conductor, and they are this pretty innovative technology that reduces the cost of electricity transmission infrastructure for either for upgrading existing power lines or new projects. Typically, you know, the steel core will provide strength, but it will sag for the transmission line, especially when temperatures rise, and they'll carry the heavy load of the conductor cables, and it's just really bad. And so TS Conductor replaces the steel cable with a specially designed, stronger carbon composite core. And so you can upgrade the line with a larger load of conductor cables, and you can improve efficiency, and it's just like bolt on. So it's really easy, and it's it doesn't weigh more, and it's also cost effective. And so you can actually be able to reduce the cost for new projects also, especially across difficult terrain like rivers. And, you know, Berkshire Hathaway has a lot of assets in the middle of the country. And so basically what happened was we had an introductory call with TS Conductor and Berkshire Hathaway Energy, and they suggested meeting with Mid-American and AltaLink, which is BHE's Canadian transmission company. So these are utilities that have a lot of transmission issues. And they had this project underway for upgrading the transmission for Mississippi River crossing in Iowa. And that's a major producer and exporter of wind energy in Iowa. And a lot of grid companies basically they were having grid congestion issues. And that was a limiting factor in terms of being able to bring more wind power to their customers. So cut to the chase, they had a lot of discussions with project managers, engineers, and TS Conductor provided detailed performance specs and developed a project proposal. And then in December 2021, Mid-American agreed to pursue a pilot project with TS Conductor. There were a lot of negotiations in terms of being able to understand, you know, what does their procurement process look like? You know, what specs do they need? What data do they need in order to, you know, meet that criteria? Are they comfortable with using a kind of new technology? You know, would this pilot be suitable? Like there's a lot of back and forth, and it took about 6 months in terms of doing the diligence and understanding the technology and getting the final budget approvals. But with us as an intermediary and BHE already trusting this technology in our diligence and selection criteria process, it helped in terms of catalyzing a lot of those bottlenecks. And the trust that Gilbert's talking about, the relationships that you built with those corporates, with those utility executives. And then and frankly, TS Conductor's founder, Jason Huang, is an incredible scientific brain, but also just really creative and also very easy to work with. Finally, orders are placed, and their carbon core cables are being used not only in Iowa, but a number of other places. And they're saving BHE now $2.5 to $4 million by avoiding the construction of 5 new towers. And so this is TS Conductor's first deployment in the US, but because of this case and because of the amount that Mid-American is saving, it's already started to create more pathways for additional customers in wind generation in particular. In addition, we got them additional funding for their Series A, and Amory Levins, one of our founders, is one of their advisors. So there's a number of different facets that kind of comes in whenever you have a highly technical product that just needs help in terms of building the relationship and understanding all the different players within, you know, the corporate that you're talking to in terms of their criteria, and then really bridging those gaps in terms of listening and being able to get the data that you need to the right people. That really makes it a lot more efficient. It always helps with an intermediary, but you don't always need one.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really great story. Keally or Gilbert, do you have another answer to this question?
Sorry, I would echo just briefly part of what pieces of what Elaine said, just to extend that slightly. Is, you know, within our team, it was so much about the proximity between product, marketing, sales, and R&D, and the relationships that we forged internally within the company. And I would say the thing that keeps going through my head is like, you just got to kind of wear them down, right? You continue to show your own form of data. You know, sometimes it's qualitative, and so to an engineering mind, I'm like, well, that's not really data. It's like, well, you know, on the human level, that does really matter. And so continuing to show up and building those relationships and not trust, in particular, is really our head of R&D. You know, she said to me, I've never worked so closely with marketing before in my career, and you know, really look at and listen to the voice of the customer. And I think it is part of the secret sauce of why we develop such a great product. But it does take time, and it does take building that trust.
That's great. All right. Well, I'm going to move on to the next question. This one from Matthew Harris is a question for Gilbert. Have you experienced any bottlenecks, challenges when it comes to interconnection of the PV systems in the communities you have worked installed? And if so, what are the ones we can look at working on to help make the process easier? Basically curious what equity looks like when it comes to interconnection.
Matthew, that's a great question. And I'll answer it from two lenses, from my utility scale solar development hat. And as I mentioned, we launched that business in late 2021. So as we were coming to market, we didn't have projects that we had been greenfielding. So our kind of approach to be able to meet the need of our customers, and you know, to start to get things going, to be able to get the foundation off the ground, et cetera, was through M&A. So we've acquired you know, some assets that were late stage that already were pretty far along with interconnection. So that's been kind of one approach. But now, you know, as we're evolving as a company, we are starting to greenfield some projects, and it's a mix. So some of it is in areas that you know, aren't open markets, and is really working with some of the utility companies that, you know, can pose a challenge. But I kind of go back to my comments earlier. When you can sell and maybe meet some of the objectives that they have as well too, they can be a little bit creative as far as thinking about ways to allow you to interconnect within their, you know, territories and areas that are traditionally monopolies. Now, we know like PJM and MISO have very congested queues, but I do think that there's an opportunity now, as they're looking at queue reform, to talk about, is there a way to prioritize projects that are demonstrating equity, addressing things like environmental justice. And that's something that, you know, as we continue to evolve as a business, that we'd like to be part of those conversations. Very pleased to see the interim FERC director, Chairman Willie Phillips, who came from the DC Public Service Commission. I know that, you know, climate equity, EJ are all things that have been, you know, forefront to him. And then I would also put my other hat on to say, from a DG perspective, similar, some of the projects that we've worked on, engaging our utility companies earlier on to say, hey, this is a community project that has XYZ benefit. It really would be great if you could support this project. And what I found, you know, versus us versus them is, you know, by engaging with them, a lot of times they'll say, you know what, like, this does make sense. This is something that we'd like to see. And they may be a little bit more amenable to not having, you know, crazy delays that can derail your project or even price the project out of even penciling out. So that's two ways that, you know, we've been able to kind of manage it on the DG side and on the utility side. So hopefully that answers your question. But yes, it's going to be with the Inflation Reduction Act and be able to meet the times now, you know, it's going to be important to work with interconnection reform with an equity lens, hopefully being prioritized.
All right, we have another question here from Chris to the panelists. Any insights into interviewing partners? We seem to find partners that take a lot of TLC, but are not creating substantial value. Would love insights and approaches to vet our partners in earlier stages. Thanks for the question, Chris. Who wants to take it?
I can start with that. I mean, there's obviously a different level of partners, but I would even say with our corporate clients, there's a lot of companies out there that have, aggressive decarbonization goals. And we prioritize the ones that, you can really find out, relatively early on that are committed to doing things a little bit differently and are really focused on climate equity and addressing a lot of problems. And those clients, when you reach pitfalls, which you will, there's a bigger cause, like I said, mentioned before, than just procuring electrons, are willing to sit down and try to work through a lot of those issues. So I think it's a two-way interview. And so, when you're interviewing your partners, are they committed to the mission as much as you are? And if they're not, I think that, maybe it's not an ideal partner for you to work with.
Yeah, building on what Gilbert was saying, it's really about understanding whether or not your objectives are aligned. We're all about impact. We're also about collaboration. We're also having this ecosystem-based approach where they're not just getting things from us, but rather they're also contributing, right? So not every corporate player, not every VC, not every, kind of partner that we bring into our ecosystem is comfortable with that. A lot of people who are in a specific sector, they want to be the only player in that sector contributing to this ecosystem. And that's not necessarily then, this may not be a great fit, because in order to move the market, you have to work together, and there needs to be peer-to-peer learning and sharing. And while there is stuff that is going to be proprietary, specific to your company or your organization, there's a willingness to engage in general transparency in order to really transform how we're operating and deploying these solutions, right? So there's a lot of, and then, you look at sort of the ethics track record of that company, and you look at a lot of other things, and also obviously, trying to make sure that you have the right contact within that organization that is going to have that decision-making power, that level of buy-in, whether or not they're going to benefit, or we're going to bring in other pools of people from that organization. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider, but for the most part, it's about trust and it's about mission alignment.
I agree. Keally?
I was just add one thing. This is so much in so many cases a greenfield effort that we don't really, it's so important to, define your objectives to the best of your ability and to kind of know what the criteria are for partnership engagement. But I think, pulling from that transparency piece, being really upfront about this is what we know and this is what we don't know, and we're going to have to negotiate around those pieces of what we don't know. But this seems to work as far as we know, but as we go forward with this, there might be something that we discover that we're going to have to work on together, because this is all so new. The energy transition is such a big effort, and there's a lot of ambiguity. So I think selecting for some ability to roll things and to have sort of an inductive as opposed to deductive approach to the partnership too.
One of the, so I hear there's a lot of activity just going on in your businesses. And I know that you guys aren't the only ones who are doing it, right? Elaine was just talking about bringing in other people, people who are more tech focused. And I'm sure that there are people who are more marketing, and then there's, sales. And so as you're growing your business and leading your business, what are some of the qualities that you find in partners or people who you want to be part of your business who are leading the partner initiative? Because I suspect it's not just you doing it all on your own, but what are some, when you're hiring, for example, what are some qualities that you look for somebody who is going to be leading partner marketing in your business?
I'll just throw a few out. Keely hit on, I think one of the key words is empathy and emotional intelligence. I think, any good partner will look through the lens of your partner and understanding, how can you be a good partner, number one, and hopefully that's reciprocated. And I think those are skills that, when you're interviewing someone and they have high emotional intelligence, high empathy, and they can demonstrate the ability to cultivate partnerships, and whatever it is, I think that that jumps off the table, and that's definitely someone that you want in that kind of role. But I think it's important to think through someone else's lens as well, not just yours.
That's great. Do y'all have any other?
I mean, I feel like we're all aligned, Gilbert, Keally. So obviously empathy, credibility, authenticity. I mean, there's a lot, and frankly, you know, the ability to, I mean, sometimes there are discussions where all you want to do is chase the money, because if you're in need of OpEx or you're, you know, there's some aspect of urgency by some level of constraint that an organization goes under, right? But you have to remain principled, especially if your theory of change is, you know, very geared toward impact, or, you know, in community orientation and being able to help, you know, whatever you were built for. You have to remain steadfast in understanding whether or not the partners that you're potentially going to bring in are really authentically going to engage in the same way that why you're built, right? So in this case, that level of principle is really key too. And, you know, I think the easiest thing as a marketer is to want to say what people want to hear or spin it in a way that's going to be accommodating. And that's not a formula for success, especially if you want to move together forward quickly and in a way that's understood. You know, I think that's the challenge, which is really just finding somebody who's really authentic in the way that they're going to engage someone and really holding within those principles of why you're built.
One thing I would add is the combination of EQ and IQ. And I think that, you know, having that analytical ability creates those lines that Elaine was just talking about, and that empathy and emotional connection and intelligence are absolutely critical, but tempering that with the ability to understand the needs of the business and, you know, where you draw boundaries and what you're really advocating for. It's a really potent combination.
Yeah. Okay, I think our last question here is from Catherine Bussman, and the question for any of the speakers: have you had any experiences, good or bad, firsthand or indirect, applying partnership marketing to an international expansion, i.e. building successful international partnerships? What are your takeaways? That's a really good question.
We are a global accelerator program, so we are present in a number of different places in the world, including our staff. That's key, because you're not going to be able to serve a part of the country where you're not present, or you don't understand the market, or you don't at least have partners that have deep engagement and understanding of what that ecosystem, how that ecosystem operates. So I think that's really important in order to build the trust and the relationships that are necessary to expand into international markets. You have to have some level of presence, or you have to have a deep relationship or partnership with others that have a deep presence there. But ideally, you have local presence, you know, in a meaningful way. So, for example, RMI has an India office that is deeply embedded with the government of India. We have a track record of success in terms of helping them with global cooling challenges that they've had in terms of deployment across a number of major OEMs to help with their cooling challenges as their population grows and as the climate changes. And that has further kind of embedded RMI as a trusted partner, and our relationship supporting a lot of startups in that ecosystem has only built up that reputation. And so, you know, the climate tech ecosystem is fairly small, especially in certain regional markets. And so, you know, we get a ton of amazing, really high quality applicants from India as a result of our reputation. And without having proven ourselves with a number of things that, you know, the Indian government has kind of qualified as, you know, highly credible, I don't think we would have been able to be in this position. Not that you have to get a government relationship, but what I'm saying is obviously that local presence is key.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a good one. Gilbert, Keally?
I'll just say from our perspective, to date, our work has been domestic. So don't have, you know, I've got partners that have done global work, but I don't really have much to opine. It would be, I think, would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have an EMEA, like, you know, within the global roofing conglomerate, and we have had conversations with our European counterparts in particular about solar roofing and building integrated PV. And just echo what Elaine said about, understanding the cultural context and local rules and regulations. You've got to embed yourself in the market, and having local presence, and also spending time there. Our head of R&D has gone to Europe and on a number of occasions, and that's where the ideas and the real genesis comes from. When people are in person, we have all this great technology that enables us to have a webinar like this, right, and to connect digitally, but there's still something about being there. We still exist in an embodied way, and so being present is so critical.
Frankly, in terms of our portfolio, we really we favor entrepreneurs who live in those areas, who are coming up with solutions based off experiences that they're having. So energy access, we have quite a few entrepreneurs from Africa who grew up in Africa, studied in Africa, are committed to their communities, and want to make sure that their infrastructure is going to be sustainable and better for the climate. Same thing in India. There's a lot of rural issues with dirty energy, as well as a number of other challenges with coal. And so, the whole point in Southeast Asia, manufacturing, food systems, there's a lot of really interesting things that we did not necessarily, as mostly kind of US, Western centric, me, I'm in California, I'm disconnected from that. I'm not going to be putting a well in Africa, like that kind of model. That's not what we respect and decenter ourselves from, having this US lens that is typical of climate tech investment. We want to champion the people who know the problems that they need to solve for. And we want to be able to give them all the connections and capital that they need in order to grow.
That's huge. That's awesome. All right, any last questions? I don't have any, so we're going to move on to the quick fire questions. I'm going to ask the panelists to quickly answer these questions. There's just a few, and then we'll wrap up. So, how to best schmooze your partner? Quickly, what do you think? What do you say?
Know them well enough to know what they need to be schmoozed with.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The finding some kind, whether it's sports, books, wine, some
Good
level
wine,
of commonality that you can win them over with.
Totally. And if I'm not meeting them in person, I'll stalk them on LinkedIn and see if I can find out anything where we might have commonality. But for the most part, it's just listening.
Yeah. No,
And just have fun, I would say. Have fun.
Yeah. All right. So in the context of partner marketing, obviously, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I say negotiation?
Mutually beneficial, non-zero sum game.
First thing that comes to mind is clarity.
Yeah.
Awkward.
Negotiation. I would say, the things that were kind of said, that's a stumper. Just let someone else throw something out first to be able to respond to as a tactic. But we wouldn't vote, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say patience. All right. What is the best channel for partner marketing?
Webinars.
Woohoo!
I don't have success with email if we're talking about digital. I know that's kind of old school, but something about a big brand or a known brand, people will still open their emails, get the inbox, deal with inbox. 99 all over again.
I honestly would say, full transparency, like these type of venues as well too, like, having conversations and panels where you can have authentic conversation, meet a wide variety of people from different backgrounds. I think it's a great channel for partnerships that you might not have thought about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's all of the above. It's like combination of digital channel marketing, marketing analytics, kind of cultivation and conversion. But definitely it's the personal things, right? It's literally just the relationships that you're building and the communities that you're part of, and authentically engaging as many people as possible. Honestly, like, just get to know as many people as possible. And there are so many opportunities whenever you don't say no. You obviously have to hold your boundaries, but what I'm saying is that is what grows your Rolodex and grows your connections and grows potential partner opportunities.
That being said, I hope everyone is sharing, I'm not on the chat, but I hope everyone's sharing their LinkedIn, that maybe some partnership comes out of this webinar. Who knows? That would be awesome. If so, please let Bettina and I know if that actually happens. We'd love to be the place where you met someone. Do you have a most awkward partnership experience?
I do. So there was I'm not going to name any names. So
Yeah.
A potential corporate partner basically proposed a one-sided partnership where they wouldn't pay anything up front to be a partner, but they wanted us to run a commercialization prize for them. And so if the prize was successful, they'd pay us on a success fee, but we'd assume all the risk and pay for all the costs tailored to their needs without knowing whether we'd get paid back. So obviously they didn't want to take a risk, but it wasn't very feasible for us. And so as much as we wanted to work with them, it was a no-go.
Oh, that's tough.
I also won't name any names, but there definitely been some, you might imagine, different pacing objectives and speed and swiftness of getting things done in different partnerships. So sometimes I feel like the crazy corporate lady who's coming in being like, we need to deliver this now. On the other side, it's a little bit more like, oh, well, we have all these things to consider, and this is our stakeholder process, and I love, but also it's a different approach.
I could write a book and do a probably 10 series documentary where, it's not always the case, but a lot of larger companies trying to take advantage of smaller companies and discounting, not knowing what your value is. And so that happens a lot.
Yeah, that's a pitfall. Okay, last question. What's your one key takeaway for the audience today?
I'm going to keep it very light, that partnership marketing is excellent. Continue to attend these events. And if you see behind me that there's a wonderful football that has a logo of the Philadelphia Eagles, and we play on Sunday in our Super Bowl run. So that the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. So that's my light closing for today.
That's awesome.
Well, Gilbert, I'm from Cincinnati, so it might be a Bengals-Eagles face-off. We'll see.
Let's go. I'll see you in Scottsdale.
I'll see ya. I think bringing joy and playfulness and fun, as Bettina mentioned, to the process of trust, empathy, and credibility, and just enjoying the process and knowing that, finding ways to be on the same side and marching forward in the same direction, finding mutual benefit through all those tools.
Yeah. We're not going to address climate change at the speed and scale that we need to without partnership, without collaborating, without working together and being authentic and, really making sure that we're centered on the right kinds of things related to climate impact potential. So, if you're trying to achieve your goal, definitely consider who you can partner with and who you can start building relationships and bring your whole self.
That's great. I would say as a closing, I think if you know your values and you lead with your values, I think that's a great way to establish a partner. So I'm going to hand it over to Bettina, and she's going to close it out for us.
Yes, and all really I can say is thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our panelists, Elaine, Keally, Gilbert, Melanie, excellent moderation. Also, thank you to Rhythm, our marketing coordinator, who's been running the technical stuff in the background. Yeah, it's been such a great conversation. We really appreciate your insight, the value you bring to this group. Thank you for everyone who attended. We love building this community. Please do show up, build partnerships, as we said, and then we wish you a lovely rest of your day, evening, morning, wherever you may be. Thanks for joining.